Hi there, if you don't know me, my name is Nayara and I graduated in nutrition in Brazil. And today I decided to record this video in English for my Brazilian followers, send it to you American, Canadian, Australian, or European guys. First of all, sorry because probably I'll make some grammar mistakes, but I promise that I will do my best. I want to talk to you about the fat myth. Why? When I moved to Canada, I realized that this low-fat culture is still strong in here. Even though we have the ketogenic diet in trend, I started to notice my patients come to me and always worried about the fat content of their diets or their preferences of low-fat products. And this is not good. And what are the functions of these fats? I'm going to look at the MacBook because I have some notes in here, okay? We have the hormone production, like the steroids. It participates on our temperature regulation, in the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like the A, D, E, and K, whatever. Promotes satiety, protection of our heart health, make the meal become more palatable. But to understand where this fucking thing was born, we have to look back to the history. So in the turn of the century, they started to get more worried about coronary disease. And we can make an association with this fact with the creation of the electrocardiogram. That they had started its study on 1791 and finished, so to speak, on 1887. And think with me now. If you have now more technology to diagnose something, of course, maybe you will have more diagnosis about this disease. Not because the disease is spreading out, but because now you are able to do a better diagnosis. Okay, mention this, we're going to 1913. At this year, two Russian physicians made a study with rabbits. This is a rabbit. They give oil to the rabbits and discovered that these rabbits developed arteriosclerosis. In the conclusion of this study, they assume that this result may be due to the fact that rabbits are herbivores, not omnivores like humans. So, to confirm that the fat content of the diet could cause arteriosclerosis, it was necessary more studies. A few years later, we have a physician that is the cause of this fat myth. And he had a big influence at the time because he created the ration K. It's a kind of a meal that the US Army were fed during the Second World War. This physician was an enthusiastic of the theory that the fat content of the diet could cause cardiovascular disease. So in 1951, he was in a congress and met a friend, and this friend told him that in his city, cardiovascular disease was not a problem. He thought this was extremely strange because at the time we had an explosion of cardiovascular disease, and he decided to go to Italy to find what happened to that population. He got there and discovered that it's true, they do not have this kind of problem there. He passed the next 6 years studying this theory, and when we have a scientist that falls in love with the theory, this is not good. Because he's going to put all of his efforts not on the solution, but to prove his theory. And this happened here. The first study was the 6-country study. He wanted to find a correlation between the fat content of the diet and arteriosclerosis. But maybe you don't know, but it wasn't just 6 countries that he analyzed. It was 22. But just 6 countries gives him the answer that he was waiting for. So he just mentioned the 6 countries. Besides that, this study was an observational study. What does that mean? It means that the researchers just observe what's going on and takes their conclusions. This kind of study, it's good to create an hypothesis, but you couldn't use an observational study to confirm or to affirm something. In medicine science, we have levels of scientific evidence. It's not like this. I observe something, I'm a scientist, and I define that something happened due to another thing. No, it's not like this. You have to submit your theory under a series of experiments to conclude that fucking thing. So, in these 6 countries, there was a huge part of the population that had died from cardiovascular disease. And these populations consume a lot of meat and other sources of natural fat. So, he concluded that cardiovascular disease was caused by the fat consumption. And if the plaque that caused the arteriosclerosis on our arteries have cholesterol inside, if you have a lot of cholesterol in your blood, probably you will have arteriosclerosis. It makes a little sense, but it's not so simple like this. Because just with this chronic inflammation associated with a high cholesterol in our blood, that we're going to have an immune response, and these immune cells are going to get together with the fat molecules, and the all problem begin. This means that if you just have more than normal levels of LDL or more than normal levels of CT, it's not just this that's going to predict that you for sure will have a coronary disease. Including at this time, the American Heart Association published a note questioning and telling the population not to worry about the fat content of the diet. It's important to tell you that we evolved when it concerns about food, having the base of our diet based on fat and protein, animal protein. So 4 years later, the American Heart Association have changed its mind. And you can think about it, oh, maybe it came to light, new studies, but it didn't. The only thing that changed that now, Ansel Keys had a chair on American Heart Association. Moving on 1977, a senator of the United States created a committee on nutrition for the population. So they created the Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs to come to a conclusion about this mess. But believe me or not, this committee was not made of physicians or dietitians or health professionals. It was made of journalists and lawyers. What the hell does people understand about health? Understand about food, understand about the pathophysiology of the disease. And the chaos was installed because they started to make ads for the populations to avoid eating saturated fats and decrease the consumption of fat of their diets. And get this, there's nothing irreplaceable in nourishment. When you take off something, you have to put another in the place. And if you have to decrease the sources of fat of our diet, you have to reduce the consumption of meat because it's source of saturated fats. What are you gonna eat? More carbohydrate. And at the same time, the society became more sedentary. And of course, the industry saw a big market to profit more and more. And they started to make their marketing. Oh, if the problem is the fat, no worries. We took off the fat of the products. But when you took off the fat, you lose palatability of the food. So you have to put another thing to maintain the flavor. And what is this thing? Sugar, starch. And I don't know if you remembered, but at the beginning of this video, I told you that fat, and not just fat, but protein too, leads us to satiety. So if we eat more fat and more protein, we tend to eat less times a day, but we do not have the same metabolism for carbohydrates. And we do not start to eat more carbohydrates like more vegetables or more fruits. We started to eat more wheat, sugar, starch, and this associated with less physical activity, more meals a day. Finally, we started to gain weight, a lot of weight. And this weight gain leads us to insulin resistance, the base for systemic inflammation. As a result, what do you have now? More obesity, more metabolic syndrome, more diabetes, more cancer, more cardiovascular disease. And obesity is the second type of death in the world. So, I'm telling you to start to eat a lot of fat, to eat a lot of bacon and cheese, and to make fried foods. No, I'm telling you that you not have to be afraid with real food, with your meat, with your cheese. I'm telling you that you have to worry about all the context of your life, your lifestyle. If you're making an activity or not, if you sleep well, if you're not an extremely stressed person. And to tell you that you have to avoid eating so much sugar, so much starch. Unpack less, peel more.